With me reacting to the big stories of the day and looking at tomorrow's newspaper front pages is my amazing panel tonight. Top sports broadcaster Aidan Magee, best-selling author, lawyer and presenter Rebecca Jane, and journalist and commentator Connor Tomlinson. Great to have all three of you with me. Rebecca Jane, what are your thoughts about lockdown pets?
As somebody that had 3 dogs, and as somebody that's got severe commitment issues, I avoided them at all costs. I think that they are fabulous. I think it'd be lovely if I could have one, but I'm not prepared, so I'm not doing it. But yeah, nice idea in theory.
Yes, and of course it was a theory for some, but reality for others, Aidan, and I wonder whether there'll be cats and dogs now paying the price.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you something, Mark, actually. Look at dating apps. It seems that in the last sort of 5 years or so, pets have been the latest accessory on every dating profile you can possibly see. Now, I know blokes who actually have bought dogs so that they can go out to the park and it helps them attract women. Not me, I might add. But
you don't need a dog.
Yeah, that is what I said.
That's not what you said.
What did I say?
You said that that's exactly why you had a pet.
No, that was off camera. No, not off camera. No, I didn't.
Aidan, you don't need any props when you're in the park, let me tell you.
Well, no, seriously, but you look through, honestly, Mark, I could show you now, I could go through Bumble or Hinge or any of those lot and go through the number of profile pictures you see. You've got Chihuahuas, Dalmatians, Greyhounds or whatever, and people are using it for reasons other than the benefit of the pet, as you made out in your monologue.
You're right, there are loads of dogs on dating apps.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to ask you, Connor, do you go to the park with a pooch?
No, I don't. I think my girlfriend would kill me, funnily enough. My actual thing is, I think there's going to be a lot of lockdown pets as a sort of replacement. You see all these dog and cat mums, because we're in currently a baby bust because of lockdown. A lot of people said, people are spending a lot of time at home with their significant others. We might see the birth rate go up. Unfortunately, the economic factors, as you alluded to in your second monologue, have put a massive cap on the amount of people who want to have kids because of their financial situation. So that means a lot of people are buying dogs, cats and budgies and etc. as surrogate children. And unfortunately, a lot of those people realise it's a heavy commitment issue and they abandon them prematurely.
Of course, our taxes are a big commitment as well, are they not, Connor? Do you think that the Chancellor can afford to cut taxes before the next election?
I think if he keeps up his spending plan, he won't. I mean, he came on GB News fairly recently and said, I'm a fiscal conservative because I know it's not my money I'm spending, and then proceeded to admit that net zero is going to cost over $1 trillion. I did some modelling on this, by the way. If we tried to do all of the country powered on wind power, we'd only meet about 40% of all of our energy needs, and it costs £3 trillion, and all of the batteries around the world made between now and 2028. So it's a bit of a disastrous plan. I think it's mainly him signalling, hey, Boris has been very unpopular for his high tax, high spend agenda, and he's been a foot soldier for that with the Treasury, printing a lot of money to make up for the furlough scheme. Inflation's essentially a tax on poor people at this point. So he's trying to say, I'm recommitting myself to the 2019 mandate that we were elected on as a challenge to Boris's leadership should he become the patsy for the bad COVID policy later on. He's seeing Liz Truss on his left in Estonia riding along a tank like Margaret Thatcher, so he's thinking, I better make some headline waves and position myself as an effective Conservative Party candidate.
Rebecca Jane, how can you borrow money and cut taxes at the same time?
Well, I just don't see how you can. In fact, actually, I sit around and I go, does the government even have a plan? Like, what are they actually doing? Has anybody actually even thought about it? Because it doesn't feel like they have. The only plan that they seem to be having, in my opinion, is that the people who are poorest in this country seem to be suffering the hardest. And where are they actually putting the money into? Do they even give it any thought? Because I personally don't think that they're quite spending it in entirely the correct areas. But, I'm not the expert on this one. I just have common sense.
We're about, within the next 12 months, to have the highest taxes since the 1950s, Aidan. Is this sustainable? Are we now just living in a high tax economy and we've got to accept that?
Yeah, I think it's high tax, it's also big government, but we've known since the 80s now that high taxation does not stimulate growth. We've known that ever since the mid-70s, in fact, when we first saw economics producing the Laffer curve, where there's a tipping point in relation to how much tax you can charge, and once it goes over that, you will get stunted growth. John Redwood was very interested on this on his one of his blogs about a year or so ago. He served in government, of course, under John Major back in the 90s, and he said that the little trick that we use in the Treasury was that if we wanted to increase our tax take and we wanted to increase revenue into the economy, we would actually reduce taxation. And that's because it carries risk, high taxation of obviously companies finding other solutions around not around the country, but around the world within the international community with a view to reducing taxes and becoming tax efficient. That's what we all do as individuals. That's what companies do as well. So yeah, we certainly have to reduce taxation. I think the Conservative government, this current Conservative government, may have to hold that back as, I wouldn't say a bribe, that would be cynical, and I'm not a cynic, but certainly as an incentive ahead of the next election, because it may not be as plain sailing as we thought it was going to be.
My fabulous panel will be with me for the duration of the show, reacting to the big stories of the day and looking at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. But what do you think? Should taxes come down between now and the next election? Can it be afforded? Or is it, as is my view, the only way to actually unlock? But is the government becoming too central with its so-called levelling up? What do we think about this? Aidan, do you think we need more power locally?
No, I don't. I mean, I remember when, I'm old enough to remember the GLC back in the 80s.
The loony left in London.
Yeah, now it gets hijacked. That's the problem. I mean, I'm not saying that happens in every single incarnation of what we're talking about here, but it was shut down. Nobody said a word for 16 years. It was shut down about 84 or maybe 86. No one said a word for 14 years. We did not need a mayor. And then suddenly, from nowhere, in the late 90s, we get Frank Dobson. Susan Kramer was the Lib Dem candidate. We get Ken Livingstone. He wins it by a street. And then I think London has kind of regressed a little bit in that period. We see it's another layer of government, it's another layer of red tape, a layer of bureaucracy. London's a very difficult place to live now. It's quite stifling even just to get around it.
The crime's not great?
The crime's not great. I mean, it's gone up exponentially since 2014. I mean, I'm not saying all these things couldn't have happened had we not, or wouldn't have happened if we hadn't had a mayor, but I don't see what good the mayor.
Do you think it's just another layer of bureaucracy?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it's talk as well. If we're serious about levelling up, and I do a lot of business all around the country, got a lot of money invested in different regions, OK? And I do business with people, and I speak to people, and I spend time among everyone who lives. Some of them don't even come to London. Yeah. If you're serious about levelling up, you've got to create meaningful, gainful employment in those areas. It's no good having regional development agencies, more layers of government. It's the market that's going to restore these places, and they are great places, some of the places I'm talking about, to what they were. That's the only way to do it. When you see companies like AstraZeneca going to Manchester, for example, and creating jobs, the expertise is in those areas anyway, because the top universities are there. Some of the top universities, you've got Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, York, places like that. You know, so those people don't really want to move to London. They only move into London because that's where the work is. Austin Mitchell, the MP for Grimsby, said about 10 years ago, he said, London is sucking the life out of the rest of the country. It's absolutely true.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, what's your thought, Rebecca? Do you think that we should have local governors? I mean, you certainly have devolved power in America in their great states, and that seems to work quite well.
Well, I don't think there's many things in America that work very well, so I'm not up for that either. But personally, I just think that what is happening with our government is that, first and foremost, it's yet another way of adding more layers when we should be trying to simplify. And I think that it's going to cost an absolute fortune to do it in this way. And I think that the amount of money that we waste with our government, and it's another way as well for them to be distancing themselves. And I think that the only thing that's probably going to end up being left for Boris and all the people that are in Westminster is fancy lunches. But essentially, my main problem is that obviously with what happened with COVID and the way that they brought in new laws and how, you know, I'm somebody that was educated in law. I spent 6 years in law school, and the first thing that they teach you when you start law school is how our laws in our country are made and how hard it is to get them passed. And what happened last year, and the biggest problem that I have with it, is how they just passed laws within a breath. And, you know, it kind of felt like Boris and his little friends had one too many drinks at night time, and essentially by 9 o'clock they just brought in a new one. So I think that no matter what this country is saying that they want to do, I have no faith in anything whatsoever. And again, I think that this is just another thing to be baffling the nation with.
But does it not bring accountability? I mean, we talked about rising crime in London. We've got someone to blame, and that's the mayor, Sadiq Khan.
Well,
I suppose he would be at the election, although because London is so firmly Labour, perhaps he's got a job for life. But then you have Andy Burnham in Greater Manchester, who spoke up for his community during the pandemic, particularly when it came to funding in his region, and he won a battle with the Prime Minister there.
Well, he did, but at the end of the day as well, I'm not really big into the whole blame culture because I just think that everybody needs to take responsibility somewhere, and I think that there's too much passing of the buck as it is already. So this is just another way for them to do it, and I just don't think that it's ever going to... I think that there's a complete no-win situation regardless, so I don't think that this is going to give us any solutions to any of our problems.
Well,
anyway.
Connor, this is arguably more democracy. What's not to like?
I think there's a lot not to like with more democracy if you're talking about voter apathy, because I'm actually in Bexley, and they just had the Sycamore and Bexley by-election. If you look at the voter turnout, it's about a third, and it was mainly the Conservatives stayed at home. You've got a lot of disaffectedness among the base. There's not a lot of passion left after Boris passed a lot of laws. But if you had another run in the bureaucratic ladder and say, OK, you've got to vote for this guy, again, we're going to pass it down the chain, rather than devolving to local expertise by giving more power to councillors and parishes that already exist, if Gove wants to smuggle in some sort of electoral reform and get more people on the ballot for his specific party, which I predicted kind of would happen, funnily enough, last time I was on the show when we talked about cabinet reshuffle.
Yeah.
I think that's a massive shake-up. It's going to have a lot of cost, as you said, and I don't think it's going to be particularly useful for the electorate.
That's a good point as well. The councils are already there. We have votes every 4 years or whatever. We have local elections. We had them last summer. If they're already there, what are they doing?
What more is it going to do?
And of course, as you mentioned, poor turnout was an issue in the 80s, which is why those local authorities were so unaccountable and taken over by extremists. So
Exactly.
I guess we've got short memories, haven't we? Lots of emails coming in on this one. Adrian says, "Dear Mark, give me your local councillors any day before MPs and these mayors. Local politics does a lot better for the people. We don't need governors. It will be jobs for the Tories, and they will try to take over locally." I'm against devolution, says Elliot, as it just creates more arguments, self-interest and bureaucracy. This all costs more money, a point made by Aidan, slows down decision-making. We have MPs and councillors already. Khan is terrible in London and blames the government for all issues in the capital. You say Burnham did well, but I don't think he did. He just disagreed with Boris at every turn as a Labour man. Turnout is always extremely low and no one cares. Damning verdict there from Elliot. I do love getting your emails. Keep them coming. Mark at gbnews.uk. Now, putting an end to the Queen's 55-year-long role as its head of state, Barbados this week became a republic. But more significantly, as well as losing a monarch, the West Indian island gained an emperor, the Chinese strongman leader for life, Xi Jinping. The 287,000 people who live in Barbados are just the latest pawns in the sights of the Beijing regime as part of its unwavering policy of world domination. Beijing reportedly gifted the new island republic £400 million to improve the country's homes, infrastructure and to build a hotel. In his fascinating Daily Mail article, the brilliant journalist Edward Lucas explained how China has begun filling the gap as Britain's global influence dwindles. Through its appeasement, economic investments, China utilises the fact that poorer nations will most likely default on their loans, effectively making them beholden to the communist state and enabling China to grow its totalitarian empire. It was no coincidence this week, in a highly unusual intervention, the head of MI6, Richard Moore, delivered a razor-edged warning about what he said are debt traps and data traps that China is laying around the world. So what do we think about this, Connor? Do you think we'll just wake up one day in the future and realise that China own the world?
Well, it is a two-pronged issue. So, first of all, China are kind of a crouching paper tiger. Not a lot of people realise that about 25% of their population works in agriculture, but they're still a net grain importer, for example. They haven't recovered from the one-child policy. Their population's only rebounded to the Great Famine level of 1961. They've got an ageing population. And their debt level's the same as the United States, but they haven't got nearly the same GDP because they set up a lot of ghost corporations. Example, they're meant to be the electric car giant, right? So when Tesla got the contract to build a thing in Shanghai, the 100 companies that had supposedly been developing prototypes hadn't developed a single prototype by the time Tesla moved into China. So they're all just shell corporations that the government sets up to then offshore money and deflate their currency. The problem is we are currently losing that Cold War in energy security and resource scarcity because we're allowing them to imperialistically expand with their Belt and Road program, which is this loan program, into other countries. The reason they need to do that is a bit like Hitler did with Lebensraum, of where they're extracting all of their materials, but it's not a sustainable way. So they need to poach them from other countries and drain them dry. If we're looking to, with our renewables policy, for example, be reliant on their 80% of battery manufacturing capacity every year, and they just seized all the lithium from Afghanistan that we left in a complete state.
Yeah.
If we're doing things like that, we are going to lose to China. All of our policies could be much better, and it could be very avoidable because China are currently shooting themselves in the foot at a rate of knots as well. But so are we. And if we want to suicide faster, then China's just going to come out on top.
And does Boris's agenda, does that play into China's hands?
Absolutely. This is one of the main things I'm actually writing about this week is looking at a carbon tax. You want to level a carbon tax across borders. It has to be border adjusted so that if you level it in here, we're not at a disadvantage from other countries that don't do it and we just lose out on tax revenue. And it also has to be revenue neutral at home so you don't get the yellow vest, for example, when people's fuel prices go up and you just tax the poor out of house and home. If you want to tax pollution, that's fine, but do it with an income tax cut. But if you do that overseas, a lot of poor countries that need goods like steel and high carbon stuff like coal because they haven't made the jump to renewables, they haven't got the infrastructure yet, they need that stuff. They're either going to come to us or they're going to go to China for the cheap Chinese steel, and they're going to rely on their loans. So we've got to be careful that our economic policies don't price out, and environmental policies rather, don't price out the third world when they're trying to develop from catching up to us, just because we've got this dead green agenda mindset. And again, we're going to be suiciding our economy, much to China's gain.
So, Rebecca, Britain obsesses over its imperialist history, just as China colonises the world.
Well, you well and truly lost me there.
We're tearing down statues and, self-flagellating about our past. Meanwhile, China are doing exactly the same thing, if not worse.
Well, for me, I think that whilst we've been too busy becoming woke and all the rest of it, China have been too busy taking over the world, and they are going to do that. I just don't understand where we would win in this game. It feels for me like it's already happened and it's going to get worse. And I don't know what on earth we do. And the best bit is that rather than us actually buying British and all the rest of it, we're still giving all of our money to China anyway. So we're just helping it along.
And we're not exploiting wonderful energy resources in this country like shale gas, for example. And now we know that Nicola Sturgeon isn't interested in exploring for North Sea oil.
Well, if we use 10% of the reserves, it'd cover us for 50 years. And we've got carbon capture technology. So the commitment to only renewables, most of the time they don't generate enough grid inertia to keep the grid stable. They don't generate nearly enough as what's used to make all the materials and that. And we're getting most of the materials from China anyway. When we could be carbon capturing that and having a clean source, same with nuclear. We could be working with the Japanese and the Koreans on those plans rather than financing everything from China. It doesn't particularly make any sense to me. The only thing I will say is the sort of cultural wokeism thing is often been compared to Mao's Cultural Revolution. That's very specific because the USSR, I don't know if anyone's heard of Yuri Bezmenov, but he was an ex-KGB agent, and he said, we used subversion tactics to demoralize the West during the Cold War. Ultimately, they ran out of money. We're kind of hoping China does the same, but if we keep financing them, they're not going to. China's bought up a lot of our university academics. One of my friends, Georgia Gilholly, has done a piece on this.
Oh, yeah.
They've
Public
got it
schools?
in MIT. Yeah.
Public schools,
It's in Oxford, it's in Cambridge. They're saying, we're going to change
And of course, we know that the origins of COVID-19 are from China. Not clear under what circumstances. Might have been a lab leak. It might have been deliberate. Could have been a natural accident. But either way, China look like they've won the pandemic as well, Aidan.
Yeah, it looks like it. I mean, it clearly came from there. I don't think anyone would dispute that. Yeah, there seems to be a real discomfort among the political classes to blame China for that. We saw Richard Bergen in the week defending China, not necessarily on the pandemic, but he was talking about evidence of Chinese racism because people in this country have spoken up about Chinese aggression, Chinese dominance. We've seen the WTA in tennis recently with the incident a couple of weeks ago. Peng Shuai, the tennis player, just went missing.
Disappeared.
There is a slight move towards resisting that aggression. The WTA have decided to pull out of a few tournaments, but we must also remember that there's precedent for this as well. We think about how the US armed Iran back in the 80s to fight against Iraq. I mean, I think that's probably worse than anything that's happened right now. They're just doing it in a smarter way.
Well, look, lots more to come from my very smart panel in the news agenda in the final hour. But what do we think? Is catcalling harmless fun? Is it banter? Or should it be banned? Rebecca, can I start with you? Have you ever been catcalled? Or wolf whistled?
Yeah. I think every female has at some point. But for me, I don't know where you're going to draw the line with this stuff. Like, where does it go too far? I also think that at the end of the day, we need to be breeding better humans rather than actually putting it down to catcalling being a problem. And I also don't think that catcalling is going to lead to any kind of reduction in violence against women. And I really despise anything that is sort of gender-based. And it kind of feels like this is aimed at the female sort of gender. I don't like it. It's nonsense.
Do you see a connection between catcalling, wolf whistling and violence?
No.
Right.
No, I don't see it. But then I think that this is another one of those snowflakey problems that, you know,
Do you think where the law should come in is when anything becomes physical, essentially?
Yes. I think that there was an element that we just mentioned, actually, about, what was it, to do with...
Hate crimes?
Yeah, hate crimes towards
misogyny?
women. Yeah, I think that might be something, but it's not just about women, it's about men as well.
Yeah.
But how do you define it?
I have no idea.
This is the problem with hate crimes. If the action is already illegal, you cannot prosecute someone for having a hateful thought in their head, because it doesn't matter if they wanted to murder you for a personal reason or for a racial or sexual reason, etc. Because then the only thing hate crimes does is set you on the slippery slope of the government start policing the thoughts in people's heads.
But is it not nice for a female or a bloke, for that matter, to walk down the street and not worry about being heckled or have anything shouted at?
You're not going to stop that. I mean, for example, what words are going to be outlawed? Am I going to be prosecuted for calling a barmaid sweetheart when I
think
pay
it's
her?
a wolf whistle kind of thing, but I genuinely start to worry about the day where I don't get that.
There was a Guardian.
That's a long way from now.
She said, men catcall me. When will patriarchy end? And then 5 years later, she said, I hit 35 and I stopped being catcalled. What happened?
Yeah, what went wrong? What do you think, Aidan?
My concern...
You little gorgeous hunk of meat.
Oh, thanks, Mark.
Fine, drink first.
Look at you.
Known him.
Sex on legs you are, love.
I've only known him a couple of hours. No, listen, Mark, what I'm concerned about here, apart from your comments, is that... Your comments about me...
Which, by the way, were all true.
No, what I'm concerned about is that I don't know, like all bad legislation, how enforceable is it? You know, they're coming off... Say a woman comes off a bus and goes up to, I don't know, somebody, a TfL member of staff, or a Bobby on the beat and says, oh, someone just pinched my bum. Well... You know, if nobody saw it, but if nobody saw it and nobody heard the catcalling, well, you're still going to have a charge. You still need a prosecution. There's still going to be needs to be a court case, and it's not going to get to that.
But do you not want a zero
it,
tolerance culture in which it's not acceptable for women to have stuff yelled at them as they walk home, potentially late at night?
I don't think the appropriate way to do it is through the legal route. I think I'd be more inclined to agree with Rebecca here.
Educate the public and
absolutely.
win hearts and minds.
Yeah. Make it socially unacceptable, more so than it is now.
I think it's getting that way, though, isn't it?
Well,
Just tell blokes it's not an effective strategy to pick up girls bibbing them out your white van, funnily enough. They're not going to fall at you.
I know you've tried it, Connor.
Oh, well, of course, yeah.
I think it's time for you to decommission that transit van.
Yeah.
You've had no luck.
You know what, John, I also think this is about what else I think it is at play here, and that's the confidence from females in the police, in London particularly, in the last year or so has hit an all-time low. This might be a cynical way of the Conservative government to try and reach out and try and mend that bridge. Yeah. In reality, though, it probably doesn't mean a lot, as to my two colleagues.
I was going to say, actually, partly as well, who proposed it was Sajid Javid. So much for being on the watch for wokery in the NHS. I think someone just handed him a mirror. The UN actually went on, I believe it was France 24, the day that I went on to debate the migrant crossings, and said, violence against women is a pandemic. So they're using the same language as COVID.
Ridiculous.
And then Wales said about, locking down only men as a curfew in response to Sarah Everard. So we're seeing the same sort of authoritarianism. Yeah, they're packaging the same sort of authoritarianism in as if violence against women is a public health measure.
And of course, what you don't want to lose is banter.
Yeah.
And you don't want to lose flirtation, Rebecca.
Yeah, what kind of society are we living in where we're even talking about this?
We lost that battle already, surely.
Yeah, Sajid Javid is basically acting as the man from the Gillette advert that walks up and puts his hand on his mate's chest to stop him chasing the girl down the street.
The thing for me is that in the world of criminal law, we have to look at the mindset of the person. And, you know, if somebody wolf whistles, who on earth is going to go into the mindset of that person and say that they've got intention to be malicious by doing that? There's no malicious intention in somebody wolf whistling. It's a sign of appreciation, and we just need to stop the snowflakery.
Couldn't agree with you more. Amen to that. Well, praise be, because a 22-year-old British entrepreneur has made a multi-million-pound fortune after his Christian prayer app for the phone was backed by Hollywood A-listers and Silicon Valley money men. Ed Beckel, the chief executive of Glorify, raised £30 million for the app that he invented in church. giving the company a valuation of £188 million. I think Aidan's going to invest in that one. Glorify allows users to worship via their smartphones, offering a curated workshop routine. Offering a curated worship routine with bite-sized Bible passages. Currently, there are 250,000 regular daily users with a total of 2.5 million downloads, a huge rise for an app only launched in February last year. So with numbers like that, could there be a post-pandemic surge in religion? What do you think, Aidan? Do you think this could be a growth area?
Not necessarily
God on your phone?
Not necessarily because of the app. I mean, I'm a practicing Catholic. I was in church on Thursday morning. Well, I go to the shorter service in the week 'cause it's a little bit long at weekends for me, for my attention span.
You like a good half hour, a tight
exactly,
half hour.
Yeah, exactly. The mass has changed. I mean, I've been going through lockdown anyway, but I mean, it's changed. There's not as much. You don't shake hands. You don't have wine, so you don't share a cup. But the numbers are quite robust. I've been quite surprised, and there's social distancing as well. I don't think. I mean, also my parish priest as well, Father Peter Murphy. He's actually got a way of putting his phone up so that people can see the mass from outside. You don't actually have to be at the church. And the problem for the church after that, though, is that they need people there. Otherwise, how are you going to give to the collection plate?
Yeah.
I'm going around with the plate, collecting money from everybody. There's nobody in there. We don't want that situation. So I think they're coping quite well.
Communal shared experience.
Yes, absolutely. And also with the pandemic as well, with the elderly congregation, I think there's a worry as well that they don't have necessarily the confidence to come back. So I think it's held up better than we expected. I'm not convinced that an app, which, by the way, at the bottom of the article, as we discussed offset, it's actually not making any money. So that's the caveat at the bottom. That's the small print.
It happens all too often. Connor, do you think that there will be a post-pandemic surge in faith? Because I just wonder whether people have started to think about life and its true meaning in lockdown.
Well, I don't think, like you said, it will be caused by the app, because Silicon Valley and Hollywood aren't exactly the most pious of types, so forgive my cynicism if I think they're not investing in it purely to spread the good word. Funnily enough, I was brought up Catholic as well. My grandparents, they've been involved with the Catenians, so done a bit of charity work and things like that over time after they lost their son. And they've said a lot of people are very eager, even younger people, to get back into the sort of community focus thing. And a lot of young people my age now, definitely more Gen Z than millennials, I'm the tail end of the millennials, they're more likely to be religious. And I think it's a lot because of the sort of social decay that online social media stuff has caused permanently. I think you're going to find more strong friends and fair weather and a stronger partner in a church than on Tinder these days.
Would a more faithful world be a better world, Rebecca?
You're never going to find that with religion. I find that I'm going to offend a lot of people here. I personally feel like the religious sector of people are actually some of the most dishonest and unfaithful people that I've come across. So no, I don't think that that's the case.
You know a bit about this as well. You investigated.
Yes, I spent 9 years as a private investigator. And infidelity was the main thing that we investigated. So.
And what did you find among religious groups? That
they are the worst.
There's some very unchristian Christians out there.
Absolutely, yeah.
Can you have an example? Can we have some examples, maybe?
Well, I'm a very sceptical person when it comes to this kind of stuff. So I'm probably not the person that we should be looking to for this kind of discussion. However, what I will say is that the way that they come as such a close community, I often find seeps into other areas. And therefore, yes, I'm going to stand by that they are some of the most dishonest people that I've come across. Also, I think that if we want to talk about dishonesty, this guy in his little app, I think he's hired a fantastic PR team for this.
Yeah, true.
I don't think there's going to be a surge in people becoming religious. I think it's a PR stunt. It says at the bottom of the article that his app has made no money. And so it's all inflated. It's all a load of nonsense. And unfortunately, I think he's given religion a bad name.
But do you not think that what we've learnt in the course of the pandemic is that it's family that we need, it's faith, spirituality, and that materialism is dead?
I think that the unfortunate thing about this is that I was also brought up heavily Christian. I'm sure my parents are watching, sorry, Mum and Dad, who are they are Church of England wholeheartedly through and through, and I'm absolutely not. I do believe more in spirituality and that there is something out there, I don't know what it is. And I think that throughout the pandemic, I feel like more people went on that train than anything else, and that actually we should be focused on what's around us, our family, and sorting out our own mindsets.
I went to the most haunted hotel in the country last week, apparently. There were even spirits behind the bar.
Nicely done.
Horrific. Off you go.
Tell you what, it's an oldie but a goldie. So much more to get through. The row started when a different woman wearing a black coat approached the seated lady herself in the tiny gap. The obviously shaken woman went on to blame the two unmasked passengers for the emergence of the new strains. But was she right to fight for the spare seat? Connor, I think this is the problem with these mask mandates. It creates conflict within our population.
It creates serious division. I mean, first of all, let's make it very clear. There's not much evidence the masks are all that great. There's about 53 million of them that go to landfill every day, 450-year decay cycle, and most of them are stitched together by slave labour in China. There's more masks than jellyfish in the oceans at the moment. And places like Germany that mandated medical-grade masks are seeing the highest spike in cases across Europe. So they seem to have done nothing. In this situation in particular, all three people involved seem to be both narcissists and driven completely insane by the COVID regulation. You've got the woman who's dressed like Jack Nicholson's Joker, screaming her head off performatively on the camera, blaming everyone for COVID. And then the other two people were assaulting her, grabbing her belongings and making themselves entitled to what looks to be a pretty small and uncomfortable seat. Honestly, get over yourselves, stand, it's a tube. You're not going to be on it for very long. Stop kicking up a fuss to social media and you're not going to die from the mild head cold that COVID's become.
It's a good point you make about the seat, actually. I've seen those seats on the new style tubes, particularly the one that runs from Croydon all the way over to Shepherd's Bush when I go to watch QPR play. Now, there's a seat there. It's almost like it's a half a seat. It's almost like one of those love seats that you get in IKEA.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of almost a sofa, but it's not really. And so if someone sits down, you're kind of invading their space anyway to some degree. So I think there's an argument waiting to happen anyway. Yeah. That's TfL's fault, obviously. But yeah, these two have taken it completely to the extreme.
And an example of COVID hysteria. This is a brainwashed nation, isn't it, Rebecca?
Isn't it just? Do you know what? I've had two incidents this week that have really riled me up, and one of them was today. One was a security guard in a well-known London.
Go on, tell us where it was.
I don't think that anybody will appreciate me doing that.
Anyway,
A posh shop somewhere in town.
It was, yeah.
Posh up somewhere. Anyway, absolutely infuriated me. I am not a mask wearer for various reasons. And I had a security guard trying to educate me after 6 years in law school on the law and asking me, this winds me right up, when they ask you where your pass is. So people with disability are now expected to go around with a lanyard around the neck, pointing out to everybody they've got a disability. I don't think so. She did it there. She's got a pass around her neck. Don't do it. Just don't do it. But she was absolutely, like, I genuinely looked at that clip and thought, are you an actress?
Yeah,
It seemed a bit bizarre.
I mean, if you're vulnerable, if there's COVID on that train, you're going to be exposed.
Yeah,
I mean, this
without
is
doubt.
the point about
It was
masks.
ever thus.
It was ever thus.
Not COVID necessarily, but that's where you got your flu and your colds from in the past.
I would have thought so. And so on the law, very, very briefly, because we need to get to the game, but you do not have to demonstrate why you're exempt. Nope. And if you find putting a mask on highly distressing, you are exempt, and that's it. Any pursuit as to why you're exempt is potentially harassment. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely, under the Equality Act.
Yeah.
And I absolutely invite everybody who is ever asked to demonstrate why they are exempt to follow it through, make complaints, and don't stand for it.
Yeah.
I think it's disgusting.
Know your rights. Well, you can buy almost anything if you have enough money, but you can't buy style. Elon Musk has proved this, perhaps, as he was photographed sporting a rather unusual mohawk haircut as he arrived in Miami ahead of the art-based Miami, an exclusive international art fair for the rich and famous. Almost $300 billion, and that's his hairdo. What was he thinking? It got us thinking about the importance of hair and how it can be a window into the soul. Some celebrities are defined by their hair. You don't even need to see their face sometimes, just the hairdo. That's right. It's that time in the evening in which we play another great British game show. So let's play Wish You Were Hair. Really excited about this. I want you at home and my panel to identify the celebrity from their barnet. Let's start with celebrity number one.
Oh,
That be. It's an easy one, Rebecca.
on. It's Marilyn Monroe.
There's someone you'd want to wolf whistle. It is indeed Marilyn
Are we getting
Monroe.
points for this, by the way?
Yeah.
You're getting
Just for
what?
fun. Are we getting points for this? Or
Money,
just
hard
won
cash.
hard cash.
Yeah.
fantastic.
Okay.
£1,000 to the winner. And there she is, the fabulous Marilyn Monroe. Okay, celebrity number two.
Kennedy.
Come on, are they going to get hard?
They are getting harder. Don't worry about
Right.
that. It is
John F. Kennedy.
JFK. Well done. full points so far. How about our next
Side
celebrity?
party.
Oh, the king himself.
It is indeed the king. It's Donald
Elvis Presley.
Trump, isn't it? Of course it is.
Absolutely.
It's the Donald, the orange one. Brilliant stuff. And time for our next celebrity. Who could this be?
None of that hair's real, by the way.
Yes. We're almost not. It's Elvis. We're not even saying who they are.
Really? If that's not real, that's what you've paid for?
Absolutely right. It is, of course, Simon Cowell. Do you think that's real? Do you think it's real, Rebecca?
Of course it is. He's had the same
It's got to be
hairstyle
real.
for
You
about 30
don't
years.
buy
He's had
that.
so much work done. He's basically an action man.
You don't buy that hairstyle.
Joe Biden did, and look how bad that is.
Do you think that men obsess too much? We talked to a hair surgeon last night about hair loss, Rebecca. What do you think of baldness?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm not a fan.
See,
but
that reaction, there you go. That's why. That's the
That's
obsession.
I have my hair cut every 5 days. Used to just
Every
be-
5
Okay,
days?
well,
All right, a bit excessive, mate.
Well, a little
You've
bit.
gone
But
Where'd you go?
it's called Barbers of Bromley in Bromley, funnily enough. And but I've struck up such a a good relationship with my hairdresser. We do all sorts of stuff outside of the salon now. He does, he does stuff, favours for the family. Family do favours for him. He's more than a hairdresser. I hope
You
he's watching.
see your hairdresser more than I see my parents. You've got problems.
Although he looks pretty good on it, I've got to say. Let's take a look at our next celebrity. Wish you were here. Who could this be?
It's The Rock.
The Rock.
It is. You just know that not from his head, but from his shoulders.
You can see the grin through the blares.
You really, really can. Dwayne The Rock Johnson. How about our next celebrity? Celebrity number 6.
It's Rod Stewart.
Yeah, Rod Stewart, yeah.
Or is it Limal, who was on the show earlier? Who, by the way, has still got it. But there you
Definitely.
go, there's Rod. Rod said in an interview that when his hair doesn't stand up anymore, that's when he'll quit.
Oh.
OK, how about this, another celebrity whose hairdo is this one?
Is this you in years gone by?
Oh, I
Yeah,
don't know.
I think it might be.
Surely
you
I'm
in
not
your-
that
it might-
handsome.
It might have been you in your balls of steel days.
I think that's you.
That shirt is actually worse than Rod Stewart's, so congratulations on
It is
It
a
looks
bit,
like
yeah.
what I'm wearing. Give it a break.
I hadn't seen an
My
iron at that
points
point.
stands.
Look at that brooding picture of me.
What year's that?
I got it.
That would have been 2004.
Wow.
Yeah, I was young,
Yeah.
with a lot of hope in my eyes.
Yeah. I'm not sure
No
about the
crow's
hair.
feet, all my own teeth.
The jawline that looks like you're chewing a wasp.
Just a little bit.
I'm not sure about the hair, but I think it will grow on me.
Oh,
Nicely done.
I see.
I definitely should have gone to the barber that day. How about our final celebrity? Let's go for this one.
That's Lionel
Lionel
Richie.
Richie.
Let's take a look. Is it Lionel Richie? God, you guys have absolutely
Well,
small. It was
that
nearly
was
me
too
for a second.
easy.
It was nearly a blend of Lionel Richie and my face. Just the celebrity from hell. There you go, Lionel Richie. But look, most of those celebrities are famous for their hair and they've mostly kept it. But I think actually, if it starts to go, you just got to own it, Connor, don't you think?
Yeah, I think if you try and do a comb over too much, it's a bit obvious. Start looking a little bit like Baldy Man from the 90s. I wouldn't.
I think they're getting better. That's the thing. I did the story in the News of the World in 2011 when Wayne Rooney had his hair transplant. And he had that picture in the back of a cab where he took his cap off. And you could see the weave coming through. It didn't look too impressive. It looks a bit wispy. But I've seen some more recently.
Where was that
I
hair
have
taken-
too.
Where
They
was
look
that
really
hair
good.
taken from, by the way?
It's usually the back of the head.
Oh, I didn't think Wayne Rooney's was taken from the back of the head.
Yeah, and I think it was.
I'm very unlucky, I think, because I'm 47 and I have more or less a full head of hair. I mean, I guess there's less than there was when I was 20 or even in 2014. But I get nicknamed curly comb over sometimes.
Oh dear.
Because the way my hair, the way I style it, it looks a bit like a comb over. But I'm no Bobby Charlton, not yet.
I did think that, I must admit, until you addressed the issue last night, Captain Comb Over, etc.
Well, I did, yeah,
And then you proved
addressed
it as well because you pushed it back. And
It's clearly not been on your mind ever since.
No, I think it's my new brand, I'm going to say. I'm loving it. I think it suits me down to the ground. But, of course, that's just a matter of opinion. But, look, I think it is a marvellous thing. Now, to lighten your evening before we go and bring a bit of joy to your Saturday, here's the moment a squealing kitten was pulled out of a car bonnet. Take a look at this.
Yavaş. واسطة الأولى يراكي شو وي اوه درمانينا واخيرا درمانينا او پیگشتن
You've got to love a lovely kitten video, haven't you? My thanks so much to you for your company tonight and all your wonderful emails as well, my amazing guests, and especially my fabulous panel, who I hope will return shortly to the studio.